So my name is Maria Sharp with the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Centre, commonly referred to as CIFFC, and I will be your host for the next hour. As we gather here, we acknowledge that we live, work, meet, and travel on the traditional territories of Indigenous peoples that have cared for this land, now called Canada, since time immemorial. I first wanted to start with some technical things. You can see on the screen that we've got just kind of going over some pieces on the tech. We have a live support on your bottom right-hand corner. They're there and available to walk you through any technical issues you may have. On the chat, just you can see your picture just on the top right-hand corner should be your photo, your camera image there, and then just below that would be the chat. And so we have an option today we'd love to get some feedback, some questions from you throughout the presentation. And our speaker today will have some questions that we're hoping you will help liven up the conversation with. So we encourage you to use the chat as much as you can here today, and so we can have a great conversation as we move forward. We also some other things here. Yeah, if you wanted to pick a different language, if you wanted to hear it in French, at the bottom bar, there's a select your language option as well. So every month, the Research and Innovation Integration Committee hosts a national fire management conversation. These conversations are recorded and posted on our CIFFC YouTube page. In April, we will shift gears to fire season prep with regional level seasonal forecasting and an opportunity to hear from agencies on how they have prepared for what looks like another really busy fire season. Today's topic seeks to provide you with a focus on the non-technical skills, so communication, collaboration, situational awareness, decision-making, and I think there's 7 Dr. Hayes will share with us here shortly. But we are pleased to have Dr. Peter Hayes join us to share his research with us in this space. Just going to take a moment here to do some technical things. Thank you for your patience. Great. Dr. Hayes, or Peter, he says I can call him Peter, currently works as a research fellow at Central Queensland University's Appleton Institute and is co-leading a Natural Hazards Research Australia funded research project titled Enhancing Emergency Management Decision-Making. I'll add his full bio into the chat just because it's quite impressive and important to get that information out there. So I'll share that in the chat. So we are so pleased that you could join us here today, Dr. Hayes, or Peter, to talk about your research and experience with non-technical skills in emergency management. So I want to welcome you.
Great. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Maria. I'll get underway with the, oops, we're I think between us dropping the slides. Get underway. Welcome. I live in Melbourne, Australia, so it's about 6 o'clock in the morning here. So if I do stumble a little bit, you'll know I'm perhaps not so sharp out the blocks in the morning. What I'd like to do today is tell you a little bit about the journey that we've taken to develop non-technical skills for emergency management. My background, as Maria's pointed out, is originally in forestry, and then in the last 8-9 years, I've been working as part of a bushfire and natural hazard CRC team, doing work around team monitoring and non-technical skills. My collaborator in crime here is Associate Professor Chris Bierman, and the two of us have been working on this material over the last 7-odd years. Although we've both got different backgrounds. Mine's forestry and then organisational psychology, and Chris's is actually in cognitive psychology. He spent some time with NASA, and we've both come across this issue of non-technical skills and other settings as well, so that's spurred our interest. So to sort of start off, we're wanting to talk a little bit about non-technical skills and the team monitoring work we've been working on. Just briefly describe what we mean by non-technical skills, why they're important, and then I'll give you a sample of some of the training materials we've developed to help organisations, such as the ones you probably work for, take advantage of these ideas and start to potentially embed them in your teams and your organisations. And if there's time, I might just briefly talk about the current research project I'm working on, which is the NHRA project on decision making and emergency management. But we'll see how we do. I think non-technical skills is the main game today, so let's crack on to that. So our research really is focused on how do we develop tools to enable and support emergency management and incident management team effectiveness. So how do we actually help them do their job well and more effectively? And our main line of work has been around team performance monitoring and non-technical skills. We believe that we believe and we see that this research offers opportunities to address some of the ongoing and what are often persistent problems, but also enhance performance. A lot of the teams we know and work in wild and fire and emergency management very often do a very good job, but we're certainly aware that there are occasions when the team doesn't perform as well as it might. And this is really some of the work that can perhaps help reduce or capture some of those risks and errors that inevitably are part of managing a live dynamic situation. So good non-technical skills can help better trap the errors or mistakes or omissions. And also create an environment that's just more straightforward, reduce the stress and strain of actually interacting with others and are often demanding, challenging and difficult events. And we also want to prepare our people to be able to be better prepared for the future demands. We know between climate change and resources and funding, aging demographic, we've got some challenging times ahead. So better preparing our people to navigate those times through good non-technical skills seems a very sensible thing to do. Good non-technical skills enable us to better use resources, enable a better team environment, and also help us think more critically about how we select, recruit, train and develop people as well. So in terms of the work we've primarily centered, we've primarily built our work using, I'm just seeing the slides, I think we've gone through 2 slides, here we go. 2 slides, that's right, just rolling. We've primarily built our work using what we call a human-centered design approach. That's where we actually work really closely with organisations to understand what are the issues and then work with practitioners to build tools and iterate those just so we can come up with workable tools and frameworks that actually address the issues and are going to be used and applied by the teams, the practitioners working in that space. And that's a really important part of this sort of research, because if we can't develop tools that address the issues and are going to be used, then we're not actually necessarily going to get the progress that we'd like. So we've developed several tools. Well, the one we'll spend most of today talking about is the emergency management non-technical skills. We've also produced 3 others. The small brother, or the youngster, is the team process checklist, which just looks at 3 aspects of non-technical skills. An emergency management breakdown aid memoir, which is a diagnostic tool to help you understand what might be going wrong in your team, and then a key task cognitive aid. Now that's been developed for Australia, and it's set at the regional or the state level or the province level for you, where it helps high level regional and state level folk stay on track with the things they have to do when they're often managing multiple events and incidents. So in terms of the importance of non-technical skills, there's certainly strong and growing recognition that they're really important for managing incidents and events. And here in Australia, we can point to certainly recent inquiries and inquests around fires such as Linton, Canberra, Whangarei, the Black Saturday fires here in Victoria, Lake Clifton, Red Hills. And if you look at them, they have all got some common aspects of non-technical skills that have been below par. So for you, thinking about your context of Canada, are there any particular large incidents, wild and fire or otherwise, where non-technical skills have been perhaps identified as a contributing factor for some of the less than ideal outcomes?
Yeah, Peter. So here, in the chat, we'd love to hear from folks. If you can, we've done after action reviews on large fires. If anyone can share anything, as Peter mentioned, that those non-technical skills that really contributed to, I guess, the the incident growing larger, or any particular issues that occurred. One of the things that I can think about is maybe on those transition days. Often when we think about transitions, any type of transitions on an incident, oftentimes that's associated with an increase in growth, or an increasing incident. And so I'm trying to think about how those non-technical skills really come into play on those transition days. I don't know if you can if we can think about what pieces or what parts of the non-technical skills might contribute to that. And certainly share things in the chat if you can come up with maybe some examples you can mention again, Peter, from those Australia or the different fires that you've experienced. If you can give some specific examples, we can maybe trigger some thoughts or memories on that.
Okay, so for instance, the Black Saturday fires here in 2009, one of the non-technical skills we talk about is managing stress and fatigue, and stress and fatigue were clearly implicated in and undermined both communication and decision making on Black Saturday. So folk were really squeezed hard, and that's an easy example. Communication was certainly a problem on Black Saturday as well. There was a lot of people not necessarily following protocols around communication, which became problematic. If we think of the Grenfell Tower in London, the situation awareness, the change, recognition of a need to change from strategy and based on actually understanding the situation was certainly seen as problematic. There's been a range of stuff that's Rona Flynn and Lagardère have done, and what they highlight is that good non-technical skills early on the incident tend to mean you tend to get more likely to get a more positive resolution than poorer. Deepwater Horizon coordination about who was actually managing the event, who was actually fighting the fire, so coordination between agencies, between ships, rescue craft. Hurricane Katrina, agencies, teams searching the same area, so a lack of communication, a lack of cooperation, a lack of coordination. Those are all very easy examples to come up with where the fundamental non-technical skills between people, teams, and organisations have been lacking.
So Peter, I'm just, I guess I just want to remind everyone, if you have any examples. I'm thinking, in terms of unified command. So, one of your non-technical skills that you'll get into more detail in a bit is the collaboration piece. So we all know, in good collaboration, we see positive outcomes from really good collaboration. If you're looking at a unified command, that would be, a good example of where that may breed better outcomes. But I think but if that skill could be honed a little bit better prior to fires to understand what that role is when you're doing a unified command, and because I know sometimes that's tricky too. There's some failures in the collaboration, or if it's not done well. We do have an example in the chat that comes to mind is an evacuation decision making and communications on the Horse River fire, which is the Fort McMurray fire, one of our larger ones, recently in 2016. So an example comes to mind is evacuation decision making and communications on that particular fire.
And we're always mindful that hindsight's a fine thing. So when we're looking back at events, we can often, adopt people should have, if this might have happened. But quite often when we go looking just quite carefully, we can see often quite clear misunderstandings going on, and then those misunderstandings not being picked up and rectified or being corrected. The Canberra fire, for instance, one of my colleagues has been doing some work on looking at the official inquiry, and what we see is that quite often there was a multitude of problems that led to poor coordination between managing the fire, allocating resources, and making it, communicating what needed to happen, and those things sort of flow to each other, and meant that the Canberra fire, wiped out hundreds of houses on the edge of Canberra because there's a whole lack of coordination, communication, cooperation, and that just undercut good timely decision making. So if we look elsewhere, we see lots of evidence from the literature. My colleague Chris Spearman's done work at this incident management team and above. He's identified a number of the breakdowns that occur and describes those for 3 major events in Australia. Pollock's work, 2013 from the UK, looked at 32, I think it was, major incidents from the UK from 1986. And if you go through their major incidents, things like the Hillsborough fire, the Buncefield Oil Depot, again, we see reoccurring themes that relate, that are non-technical skill related. So that's sort of some of the background to, some of the both scientific, sort of research background and some of the inquest and first-hand or should I say, inquiry material. What we're keen to do is, enhance or encourage the development of non-technical skills so people can be better prepared to manage events, and then also refine those non-technical skills. So, as I say, the more challenging future that we appear to be embarking upon is at least more manageable for them, and also means that they are in better shape to take on those challenges. So in terms of non-technical skills, a term that some of you might be familiar with is CRM, or Crew Resource Management. Back in the late 1970s, aircraft were falling out of the sky or not landing safely, and there was increasing focus about what was happening, and the analysis showed that very often some of the problems that were leading to planes not landing safely or not making it to the destination were related to how crew on the flight deck were interacting. They had a low fuel light, and the pilots got distracted with the low fuel reading, or the not being able to get the undercarriage down, or there would be a variety of problems or mishaps that would distract the crew, and they wouldn't use the resources to properly execute the mission or the flight. So often they were seeing that these situations were often recoverable, but because the crew didn't use all of their combined talents, all of their resources, the flight then foundered. So this sort of led to the idea of crew resource management. How do we train people to actually interact effectively on the flight deck to maximize their combined resources, particularly if the flight is working in more difficult conditions, so landing in a really rough storm, or piloting a plane, with an engine that might be malfunctioning, or bird strike, whatever it might be. How do we actually make sure they can maximize those resources and use them effectively? So crew resource management is effectively a training program for pilots and other folk in aviation, to actually help them maximize their resources, and much of the content focuses on non-technical skills, and typically communication, decision making, leadership, coordination are the sort of topics that you see there. But if we look across a number of high reliability sectors, we see in health, air traffic control, rail industry, maritime, they have all introduced various forms of non-technical skills training into their midst, recognising that they're an important set of core professional skills. And I'm just seeing where I am on my slides here. Yeah, and for some reason there's a slide has jumped out from me. The definition I had for non-technical skills, I think it's a slide we've slipped past, is a set of cognitive and social and personal resource skills that complement technical skills and contribute to the safe, efficient task performance. Now, what in essence we're talking about are the skills that underpin professional performance. And the analogy that's sometimes given is, imagine you're a mariner. You need to be able to read a chart, you need to be able to understand the weather, you need to be able to navigate the boat, set the sails or the engine for the right conditions, get the boat from A to B, and your passenger and cargo safely. But to do that, you're working with a range of other people, the crew, and you need to direct and guide them, work with them, and create an environment where you each interact, communicate, coordinate, cooperate, manage your stress and fatigue, remain aware of the changing sea conditions, changing weather conditions, and keep on making good decisions relevant to those changing conditions. And those are the non-technical skills that kind of are fundamental to professional practice in many occupations. Certainly all those listed there, but in many occupations, often it's interpersonal skills, the decision-making skills, that actually help us apply and combine technical understanding and technical skills to create effective outcomes. So as Maria pointed to, we've developed a non-technical skills framework. And I'm just aware of time, so we'd suggest that the advantage of these frameworks is that they focus on behaviours, and especially around thinking and social skills that are important for work, and they're transportable skills. We can create an agreed framework of desirable and undesirable behaviours for safe work. They can create a consistent and common language. So the problem we sometimes have in managing teams is there's not necessarily a clear and consistent language about how we talk about how we interact with one another, how we provide guidance and feedback to people. We can think about them for training, selection, debriefing, competence assessment, and also they provide a more integrated framework to help us think about what if we introduce other interventions and how they might impact what's going on. So, for instance, I'm going to bring in a new leadership framework here. How might that work? Or add some new training here. How might that interact with the existing system? So EMNoTS is the emergency management non-technical skills. It's 7 skills, and I'll talk some more about those. We've developed quite a range of resources. Here's 4 of the resources that I'll just touch on today. So EMNoTS itself, and that diagram, that sort of detailed blob beside EMNoTS is a page of the EMNoTS. It's a 42 item list of non-technical skills and behavioural markers, so you can actually observe them in teams and see whether they're in play or not. We've authored a guide to non-technical skills. It's a 45-odd page document with all of activities, and it unpacks each of the 7 non-technical skills, explains why they're relevant, how they work, some literature, and provides a whole range of activities to help people think more critically about those. We've produced some workshop training for the EMNoTS program for non-technical skills. And then down the bottom, we've also looked at some current training in Australian wildland and fire, and reviewed it and made some suggestions about how we might embed non-technical skills into that training. Now, I've given, I think I've sent all these copies of these all through to Maria. These are available, 2 of these are available from that driving change link that's shown there, and I think Maria might put these in the chat. And we'll also, you can also, if you're interested in the workshop materials, then you just need to fill out a Google form, and we can create enable you to access those as well. I'll check in with AFAC about their resource, but it's very likely that they're very happy for us to share that with you as well. But I'll check with them before I offer something that's that I should check on first. In terms of the non-technical skills training, this is the EMNoTS workshop. We have developed 2 workshops. One, they're not a lot different from each other, but one's a sort of introduction to non-technical skills, and the other is a slightly more advanced product, which is designed more for more senior practitioners and instructors. And it has 9 modules that covers the cooperation, coordination, communication, leadership, decision-making, situation-based decision-making, and managing stress and fatigue. And I'm just going to give you a sample of the sort of materials that are shown in that workshop to give you a sort of flavour of the workshop. We usually run them over about 5 or 6 hours. We've presented them both online, and we've also run them live. Live can be more interactive. You can actually probably get a bit more interaction going, but they can absolutely be done online, and they can work well. So I'm just going to perhaps work through a few of them sort of slides to give you a flavour of how we create the conversation around non-technical skills. And there's a couple of points where I might ask for some input as well to see what your thinking is around these non-technical skills, to sort of show the sort of conversation that we're trying to create. The other thing to think about is that the non-technical skills we're talking about are, as I say, we would argue are just good professional practice. And some of the feedback we've had from agencies as we've been working with them has been these also are kind of just fundamental, we think, great behaviour that we should, as an organisation, be endorsing and encouraging. So from an organisational culture perspective, and just from just straight organisational, how do we support, develop people, and how do we provide guidelines on good behaviour that we want to see? What we are promoting is very consistent with that. So I'd normally ask if we were a workshop about the dream team versus the dysfunctional team. I won't do that today, but it's always an interesting question to say, look, tell me about that dream team that you worked in. What did it look like? What did it feel like? What was going on? And then think about that really dysfunctional team that you're in, that you really struggled. It didn't get stuff done. It was hard work. It was hard yards. And this slide, or this question to usually a group of wildfire or fire or special emergency service here folk, usually generates some quite strong language and some quite clear views about what a really good team tends to have and what a dysfunctional team has. People, I think, have got a pretty good idea of usually what's desirable and what's not. And this slide really quickly starts to actually precipitate that. And from that, we often get much of the non-technical skills comment that then, as we work through the workshop, we can check back and say, look, hey, Chen, you mentioned this. Hey, here it is here, isn't it? Let's talk some more about this. So you often can set up a conversation here by getting participants to think about what's desirable, what's important, and then that very much then starts to help reinforce what they think are good team behaviours are very much aligned to what we see as the core non-technical skills. The other thing that we do here is just make the highlight that just good teamwork itself is not actually the answer. You actually need to have good technical capability. But you can have good technical capability and lack of team skill, and you won't get a good outcome. And for the basketball tragics here, you'll probably be aware of the result of the basketball in the 2004 Olympics, and USA was very favoured given its fairly stellar lineup of players to do well, and yet they got the bronze medal. So this is really sort of highlighting the fact this, if you've even have the best talent, if folk aren't working well together, then you're not necessarily going to get the most effective or the top performance out of them. So sort of highlighting that talent is, ability for people to work well and people to know what they're doing and be competent is important, but people working well together alongside that is also crucial. This is the EMNoTS checklist. There's 2 pages of it. I won't spend too long on it, but this is again available from the Driving Changes tool and also on that link, I think. And I won't spend any time on it, but we can use this for lots of different purposes, and I'll touch on that a little bit further down the track. But hey, non-technical school systems usually have 3 elements. You have the skill, and so you see the first one there, I think is probably cooperation, if I can read my eyesight's not all it could be. Yes, it's communication, sorry. So it's communication. And then you've got what we call elements, and then we've got the behavioural markers. And so this is the elements are effectively a cluster of behaviours, a cluster of behaviours. And then we've got some marking to see whether you're seeing them or not. And they can be used to, as I said, to audit a team to see what's going on. It's the easiest way to use this tool. You could also use it in an after-action review to talk about what's going on as well. But it also just provides some fairly clear guidance about what's desirable and non-desirable behaviours. We've got both positive and negative behaviours. There's a negative behaviour for each of the 7 non-technical skills. And that's to get people thinking, obviously, more critically about what's going well and what might be problematic. In terms of the way we actually would train non-technical skills, similar to the CRM approach. There's sort of a 3-step model. So the first piece is really basically around raising awareness. So actually helping people actually understand what are non-technical skills. The fact that they're part of professional practice, they're the interpersonal decision-making, managing stress and fatigue aspects that help us maintain focused and use our technical and other competency as well. And that's the first piece, is to create that awareness so people know and have got a familiarity with them. The next two stages are around practice and feedback, providing the opportunity to practice, receive feedback, create common language for non-technical skills. And there's lots of different ways we can do that, but you need to actually start to actually bring them into life and into practice. And not just when it's an emergency, but arguably actually throughout your organisational activities. And then lastly is about that continual reinforcement, the idea that we have a little bit of refresher training, and we also formalise some aspects of it's their needs and their requirements within our organisational system, so it becomes promoted and encouraged, and part of really professional practice in the organisation.
Peter?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just wondering, in terms of that checklist, can you give an example of how we would use that operationally? That's, I guess, here in Canada too, we have incident management teams. Obviously, sometimes there's teams that get set up on the fly, but we do have teams that, we know the teams going in, there's opportunity to do the training and that kind of thing. Are these checklists intended to use like sort of on incident or sort of before for training? How do you operationalize those?
So probably a good place to start with them is during training and exercising. That's the easy place to start with them. But depending on where the incident's at, you could, particularly again, if you're in the sort of de-escalating phase of an incident, there's no reason perhaps you couldn't use a checklist to see how you're doing. I've seen ICs actually, sometimes, just have them beside them, and sometimes they've had a quiet minute or so, and they look over at a wee checklist and say, just having a think about what's going on here and how we're doing. So just a sort of mental note for themselves to think about how is the team doing, and looking across at it and saying, well, is this what I'm seeing in the team? I thought we could also use them in an after-action review to say, look, let's talk about what's happened during this incident, this event, this exercise, and say, well, actually, how do we do on these criteria? What was appropriate decision-making frameworks or styles being used? Were actions, were decisions being well communicated, etc. So we can actually use them in a variety of settings. It's certainly quite feasible to use them in incident. It's just probably if the incident's going gangbusters, then probably there's not much space for using these in themselves. But in and around those moments of intense, the more intense moments, there should be some capacity to use them in an incident, but certainly through exercising, training, and also when you're actually not doing the more acute events as well, during planned burning, etc.
Yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but when you had that question about what non-technical skills examples we could use, with that caused sort of those big fires or those big incidents, what non-technical skills contributed to that. A lot of times they're not specifically named, so it's interesting to use this list in the after action review, because while the things may come up as all these reasons why in the after action review, a lot of them do tie back to non-technical skills. Maybe they're just not named that way. So interesting to have that checklist to figure out, like, okay, this happened because of this reason, this technical reason, but is there non-technical stuff happening in the background? Super interesting. So anyway,
yeah,
that's right.
And then the Canberra fire is a great example where we've been doing. So we've got a paper coming actually out of an analysis of the Canberra fire, where we've gone and looked at specific breakdowns in what's going on, and we see that there's often a cluster of non-technical skills that are contributed to some poor outcomes of decision making or of coordinating action, etc. So great. So just moving on, talk a bit about that's non-technical skills. I'm just going to briefly talk about cooperation or collaboration as Maria was introducing it. They're part of what we call a 3 Cs, and we'd argue that's sort of fundamentally teamwork. If we're going to talk about teamwork itself, we will talk about cooperation, coordination, and communication as the 3 Cs of teamwork. And the metaphor that we use for this is basically a 3-legged stool, which I'll point to in a minute. Now, normally in the workshop, some of you may have seen this video. It's fairly well known one of a mythical USS Montana in the Irish Sea, storming through heavy seas, and it calls to there's a radio call coming in, and basically the radio call saying goes on that to the other call, the other radio call, and you'll make way for us, you'll give way to it, you'll get out of our way, basically. And as the story unrolls over the minute or so, you realise that the other vessel is not a vessel; it's actually a lighthouse. So this. And it's all about what's happening on the bridge, basically, of the USS Montana. And so we use this as a sort of introductory point to think about teamwork and get folk in the workshop to think about what's happening here. There's this very robust, staunch captain who's very, very, very strong and clear about this vessel's going to give way to him, but clearly doesn't have great understanding of the situation, and it doesn't appear that any of his crew around him are actually necessarily adjusting his expectation or keeping him appraised of what's going on. So there's a whole lot going on here. So it's a way of starting to think about the fact that people quite often make decisions or act in ways, and there's a team at play here, and quite likely some other people in the team know a bit more about what's going on and may or may not be able to help or perhaps adjust what's going on, so we don't have a problem of a ship versus lighthouse. So it's quite funny, but it's a nice way of starting to think a bit about the way that we think about teams and leaders, situational awareness, making decisions, communicating, providing cooperation and support to one another, coordinating actions, etc. Then we move on to talk about this teamwork and the three-legged stool metaphor. The idea that we actually these things go together. That if you don't communicate, then you can't create a coordination within the team. If there's a lack of cooperation, people then often stop communicating, and they are less likely to coordinate their activities with you. And if you're not well coordinated, people get frustrated and stop cooperating with you. So there's sort of the three go quite, interact quite closely, and a problem, one of those three often will undermine the other two. So it just tends to undermine the sort of the performance that you need out of a team, particularly when you're talking about high stakes, complex dynamic settings. If you've got a problem in any one of those three, then you start to see problems. And in terms of the concept of teamwork, what we're trying to promote, the idea is that in Australia, our teams are becoming increasingly diverse. I'm currently interviewing at the moment decision makers, and I'm talking to folk across Australia about their decision making, and some of them are saying to me, look, I'm managing a large incident, and 20 years ago it'd only be one or two uniforms or one or two flavour of people in the IMT. Now there could be 5 different flavours of people in the IMT, and it's much more diverse, and people are moving around more in Australia. We're just seeing a lot more movement, a lot more interaction. And this idea of transportable team skills, the ability to be able to work in multiple teams and be able to slot in with people you haven't worked with before. And this slide sort of speaks to the fact of why non-technical skills in some ways are really helpful, because they're really fundamentally part of preparing people to be transportable team players or transportable team members. So we see there that the fundamental skills are largely non-technical skills. We're talking about communication and feedback and conflict and interpersonal and leadership, and we're talking about an ability and attitude and an understanding of how teams kind of roll and what you need to do to be successful and work successfully in the team. And then there's some personal attributes, and those things around generally cognitive ability, collective orientation, adaptability, and conscientiousness. And of course, we want to avoid people from the dark triad. So narcissism, Machiavellism, and psychopathy are the folk we don't want in our teams. But in essence, if we're trying to recruit and develop people, we want the non-technical skills, we want a positive attitude, we want that nous to know how to work in a team, and we want some positive personal attributes to complement that, to make them really good team players. So if we talk a bit about coordination, and there's some questions that are always worth asking, and that's a bit about what's some of the more important corporate behaviours you should expect from team members, what might be some of the problematic behaviours, and is competition within or between teams helpful? And that last question is always an interesting one for organisations, because inevitably we have a range of people who range from pretty competitive to maybe not so competitive, and it's always interesting to understand how people think and feel about that, and understand both its advantages and sometimes some potential costs that go with it as well. So they're the sort of questions that we probe. I'm aware of time, so I might just move on to another slide as well. But that's can create a really interesting discussion. Sorry, Maria, did you want to say something? Good. So it's a really good discussion, and it's a good conversation to even have with your own team to think about when you're thinking about what are the behaviours we expect, what might be seen as problematic, and these are some of the informal stuff we can do around setting norms about what we expect, generally backing up behaviours. If Maria here is being squeezed by workload, generally we will try and help her out, or Peter is, and also, by the way, Maria is also, if help's offered, then generally she can, we'll pick it up, and if it's appropriate and sensible to as well, not refuse help to be helped as well. So those norms around actually both offering and receiving help, at the appropriate moments, and also the competition one as well. Thinking a bit about that. There's some really nice work undertaken by Nicola Power and others in the UK that highlights the competitive nature of the emergency management sector, and Nicola, she talks a bit about the competition and the lack of trust that is created between emergency services in the UK because of the fact that there is competition between those agencies, often vying for control and position. And even within organisations, we can have that same problem, that teams can be competitive, and that can create some problems as well. So just obviously flagging the point that there can be some challenges and problems around competition. So one of the we've used some scenarios in the workshop, and these are ones based my PhD, I looked at incident management teams and built simulations. And this is a scenario that appeared more than once in the simulations I ran with incident management teams. And in this scenario, we see we've got you're normally running a simulation exercise for another team in your agency, and Angela, who's previously worked elsewhere in the organisation, has been appointed to be the team leader for the 3-hour exercise. And Trevor, who some years ago has previously been worked with Angela, appears bent on showing up Angela by asking lots of difficult questions and testing her in various ways. So I might just ask you a couple of questions about this, but the first question is, what do we think's going on here? What do we think's at play here? Why is Trevor? What's going on here? Why is Trevor behaving this way? And great to hear your comments in the chat, please.
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you. Just as a reminder, the chat is just below the image of your face. I think the image might be there. Just in the top right-hand corner, just below is the chat. And we'd love to get some feedback there from folks on the line. They're typing at this moment, I'm sure.
I'm sure they are. And if they, here we go. We'll give them a couple of minutes.
Okay, yeah, I got to reread the exercise too, so maybe that's what's happening. Okay. So I see that the names have been changed to protect the identity of the individuals. Is that right?
Anonymized, are they? Anonymized. Someone's probably saying that was me,
We do have a comment here. An old power dynamic that leads to conflict that wasn't resolved.
Yeah, that's a nice observation, Matthew. Thank you.
Can you see the chat there, Peter? Jealousy or competitiveness?
I can, yeah, nice. Yeah, good observations, aren't they? Yeah, nice, and a great comment. Yeah. Okay, so I won't step through all of the things, but those are great start points. So obviously, it's quite clear that people are seeing this behaviour as poor and probably related to some back catalogue here, as we might say. As you say, maybe some previous relationship history, a grudge, some sort of conflict that's previously occurred. And this is actually, as I said, based on a couple of cases I actually saw and actually play out. So you could argue it's about ego, or as you say, poor relationships. But the challenge we have here is that Trevor's behaviour is actually undermining the opportunity for the team to learn here. It's an exercise. This is supposed to be a learning and development experience. And here is Trevor off on his crusade to undermine Angela. So you can sort of start to see that he's already working against the team interest here. And so the second question is about what non-technical skills are at play, and we can certainly see that cooperation, but we can also see that lack of cooperation is now starting to undermine coordination and communication. So, he's actually starting to cut across. He's interfering with Angela's and the team's ability to stay focused and working on the event that they're trying to manage. And then it just asks the question also about, of course, what team members' roles might be here. So in terms of rectifying the situation, there's lots of ways we could proceed here. And there's a real balancing act, because we actually need to be careful not to undermine Angela, because you will have difficult people to manage in your life, and this might be part of the learning to do that's important. But also we can see that there is a problem here that Trevor's undermining the opportunity that this training opportunity actually has, would provide to the team. And I would suggest that ideally, if some of the team members could actually provide some comment or some gentle nudging towards Trevor and say, look, mate, you need to back off a bit here. I don't think you're being reasonable or fair here. Would be collectively a great way forward here if other team members will also started to highlight their discomfort or their unhappiness with the fact that Trevor's getting carried away here, to say the least. And of course, from an organisational perspective, if we don't rein in this behaviour, then that can become a problem. Now, the character concerned here, actually, I know otherwise, I've worked with him otherwise, and I've seen him do this in other organisations. And then he's also a province or a state duty officer, so he's actually a very senior character in the organisation. So he's actually modelling this behaviour to a whole lot of people in the organisation. So this also points to an organisational issue, that we have people whose non-technical skills or behaviours are problematic, and yet they quite often stay in the roles. Technically, this character is very good, but it appears that at times some of that poorer behaviour is not necessarily being well managed or run. Looks like someone's got a speaker there, is it?
Do you see something, Peter? Or?
I saw a red under speakers. That's right. That's right.
Oh.
I'll keep on moving. Anyway, so that's an example of a scenario. We've run several other we've run several other scenarios that are built on the on those sort of vignettes of situations to get people thinking a bit about non-technical skills, and broadly, if that we don't address those, then they can create some persistent patterns of behaviour that are problematic. So, great question about non-technical skills and technical skills. If you drew 3 overlapping circles, or we'll start with 2 to make it easy, 2 overlapping circles, non-technical and non-technical skills, you could probably show as 2 overlapping circles. You need to have fundamental knowledge of the domain. And so for the mariner, that's the understanding steady state, being able to read a chart, read the weather. But then you need to apply decisions, communicate and make decisions, coordinate actions around that. And in the same in wildland fire, you need to understand the fundamentals of fuel, of vegetation, topography, climate, weather, and the sort of fundamental resourcing and the different methods we can use, the different resources we use, are the sort of core technical knowledge you need. And then non-technical skills mean that you can work with other people to deploy, manage, make decisions understand and adjust your plan and actions to hopefully resolve the incident. So good non-technical, so I'm just reading the question, good technical skills and knowledge but poor communicator, or great non-technical skills, is it resolvable? Is your head? So the skills are generally the teachable piece of the equation. So when we're recruiting people, there's always this decision about what do we buy, in other words, what do we recruit for, and what do we develop or build. So, but the buy and build conversation is quite common in the space I work in, and you may have come across this term before called KSAOs, knowledge, skills, abilities, and other characteristics. I'd suggest that the first two pieces, knowledge and skills, are the things that are the most trainable, that we can develop. But the abilities and the others, personal characteristics, are the more difficult, are more inherent, are more difficult to actually train, that they've got they're harder work to develop. So in thinking about this, arguably non-technical skills, along with a good knowledge of the domain, should be all quite trainable, coachable, and developable. But we also need to make sure that we have robust, reasonably fair and robust conversations with people about what they're doing well, and also where there might be some shortcomings if they need to up the game on one or two areas. And that's feedback. Fundamentally, we don't like giving feedback. And about a third of feedback we give to people is not taken positively. And that's quite often because people give feedback that's normative. I compare you to someone. Peter's not as good as Maria. That's not helpful feedback. But if I said, well, Peter, you could improve by doing these sort of things, then that more constructive feedback is more likely to be perceived and acted on. So often the way we have the conversations is sometimes part of the challenge, and it does take discipline and patience as well. We have time, so I might just flip through, just highlighting that cooperation has sort of got foundations around trust and psychological safety, and other words, comfort around speaking up around others, offering opinions, reporting errors and responses. That sense of collective efficacy, the idea that we know what's, that we've got comfort that our team can perform well, and that our team generally is looking out for each other. They're cohesive, they're working together, and are trying to do things in a unified, coordinated way. So I'm just going to move on to highlight that once we've had that conversation, then we come back to the non-technical skills markers and then elaborate on those in relation to the conversation we've just had. So you can see these are the non-technical skill elements and behavioural markers for cooperation from the EMNoTS that you saw earlier in the large sheet. So in terms of bringing it all together, you were asking before about how we can use it. So we can use it for real-time evaluation, as I said, maybe not during the most difficult parts of an incident, but certainly in the wind down, when things are a bit more steady state, during after action reviews, and generally just to help train people as well. When we're training people, this is actually a nice checklist to say, look, these are the sort of desirable behaviours we're looking for, and we can also think about what might be, problematic or less desirable behaviours. We use, as part of the training, a short animated video, a short video out of Ghostbusters. It's a short, 4-minute scene, and we get teams to use the EMNoTS then to rate what's going on the non-technical skills. So it's a non-fire, non-emergency management situation, although in this case, they're trying to, capture some ghosts in a ballroom. But what it does, you can see that the fundamentals actually work there. So it's an easy way of getting people to think about the same skills of, coordination, cooperation, communication, etc. In the scene. So we can often we run it to a couple of times, and then we get people to work in groups and identify what's going on and then rate them, etc. So an easy way to start, and then you can use other footage as well if you want to rate teams. There's lots of opportunities to develop non-technical skills. Here in Victoria, Emergency Management Victoria have actually developed an online introductory model for their people. They have offered the Australian agencies, and they may be interested in doing this for the Canadian agencies, have offered the code, build on Articulate for their online resource that they've built for non-technical skills. I think it's about an hour-long online training module. So feel free to come back to me and I can put you in touch with them. But they've used this material and operationalised it. Another organisation here has also done similar, but they're in a slightly different sector, so less relevant. In terms of informal opportunities, modelling non-technical skills, regularly talking about it, taking a pulse on your non-technical skills, those coachable moments. Some of the best non-technical skills I've seen from really good ICs is them actually just taking the time out to coach, even in the middle of a fairly hectic incident, just taking 30 seconds out to just have a conversation with a new operations officer to say, look, hey, this is going well. Let's have I'm just question mark about this. Just some really nice nudging to help people develop and learn, but also pass on, the things that are non-technical skills and the related things that are important. There's lots of opportunities for organisations to think about how they put these into play. If they rate them and value them, then individual development planning, delivering their own training, including as criteria in your promotion and position descriptions, including within your performance appraisal systems, training, encouraging, enabling use of the skills in all activities. Again, this is the awareness, practice, feedback, and continual reinforcement. I won't spend long on this, but there's lots of things you could schedule in each of those buckets to make to integrate or embed non-technical skills in the mix. I'll flick past this because it's probably quite Australian-centric. This slide shows a resource we've also built. This is the AFAC resource. I'll check with AFAC and see whether we can share this with you, but it's embedding non-technical skills in emergency management training. We work with Queensland Fire and Emergency Service, actually their rural fire service piece, and National Parks and Wildlife Service in New South Wales to look at their training and then identify some opportunities to embed and enrich their technical training with non-technical skills. So it's about it's not a long document, about 20 pages long, and it highlights the current training, highlights where there's a little bit of non-technical skills training, and then highlights where that could be enriched or developed further. I'm going to stop there just with the last slide to say I've got another project underway, which is the enhancing emergency management decision-making project. If you're interested, feel free to have a look at the website there as well. But I'll stop there because I think we're just about out of time.
Thank you, Peter. We've got some, great comments in the chat. Thank you. I think it's really important to balance the technical skills with the non-technical skills. So much to cover in such little time. We definitely have to get you back. And we also recognize that it's 6 in the morning. We've switched our time so that it wasn't 5 in the morning, but 6 in the morning is still incredibly early. So thank you. What I want to do is send around to the participants some of the resources. And I also want to let you know that there was a lot of interest in this presentation. Just coming into fire season, it was difficult for people to make this time work, but we have the recording. We'll certainly put that up on our CIFFC YouTube. And just so you know, Peter, we've got tons more people that arrived here today interested in this. And of course, there were some technical issues as well that hopefully will, glad to give that presentation out to everyone. So yeah, if we could share some of those resources, I think that would be appreciated.
Right. I'll follow up. I'll double check with AFAC on their resource, but I'll come back to you on that. And then if you're happy to just distribute at your end, assuming they're happy for that, then all the rest are freely available and you can share. The only thing is the Google form for the training products, which again you can share with your membership.
Yeah, so I have that put in the chat. So certainly consider reaching out to them for those Google Forms and further information. I wish that we had way more time to talk about this today, Peter. It's a really important topic and one that I hope we can have future conversations with you on. But I want to say thank you so much for spending the time with me. Yeah, we'll talk soon.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, everyone.